will be live.
Okay.
There we are. We are live with Dr. Tara Skye Goldin. And we are probably about 20 minutes apart driving. So always good to be with someone local, connecting, having another referral source. And Dr. Tara, I would ask you how the weather is where you are, but I assume, although Colorado, the weather could be very different, 10 or 20 minutes apart.
That's right.
How's your day going here in Boulder, Colorado?
It's going just fine. Saw a bunch of patients in the morning, and now I'm doing this. I have some more in the afternoon.
Awesome. I have to say, with your last name, the Goldin there, it's I'm surprised you didn't move 30 minutes south toward in the town of Goldin, Colorado. It could have been
well, my
Dr.
husband
Goldin
works
in Goldin.
My husband works down in Goldin, but I'm Goldin.
Yes. She's in the gold. All right. So we're talking about you are a naturopathic doctor, and your specialty here is digestion. So there's a lot to cover there. Let's get into it. First of all, for those who don't know, what is a naturopathic doctor? Why is that different than a medical doctor, MD? You got DOs, doctor of osteopathy. And it's a confusing place, this whole healthcare space. That's why we do these conversations, hopefully to spread some awareness. I call it Bo Knows Health, and it's all about me learning more. I know some stuff, but I'm here to share so you guys can teach me. So Dr. Goldin, tell us about naturopathic medicine.
Well, naturopathic medicine, it's a form of medicine that uses natural medicine mostly, though in some areas it's kind of morphed into more like osteopathic, where they prescribe some naturopaths prescribe only drugs. But basically, the naturopathic medical training, first 2 years are like any medical school. You need pre-med to get in. First 2 years are like you learn pathology, biochemistry. Second 2 years, instead of learning drugs and surgery, we learn, therapeutic nutrition, biochemistry, all the vitamin pathways. We really get major into the pathways, some botanical medicine, and it kind of veers off into, hormone therapy, and other things are added. And even seems like some of the newer naturopaths are doing things like peptides and stuff, but I don't offer that right now. So it's different from functional medicine. It's the original functional medicine. Basically, it's trying to figure out what the root cause is, and doing nutritional interventions and more holistic interventions to get the body going in the right direction, because we have the innate power to heal inside of us. But that gets suppressed from lifestyle, the environment, epigenetic things, all kinds of stuff can get affected by that. And so functional medicine, they created functional medicine. The main difference is they created it as a way for MDs, DOs, and even like health coaches and nutritionists to learn some of these things. But the original was the naturopathic medicine. We were the original functional medicine. And in fact, a lot of my classmates ended up teaching for IFM and A4M,
Institute of Functional Medicine.
Where a lot of people train. So that, I hope that's the quick answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess why do you think there was a need to not? If you're saying it's kind of the same thing, was it just a rebranding effort? Was it to go around licensure stuff? Like why was there a need to? If it was kind of the same thing, it's like, again, you have physical therapists.
It's rebranding, yeah. And I think they've been really good at marketing functional medicine, and it's a way for people with other degrees to go and get the training so they can do somewhat similar things than we do. But we do have our own lane to so to speak, from the functional medicine. And what I did in my journey as a healer and practitioner is I ended up specializing in digestive health, because I really found that it was the root of a lot of pathologies, from inflammatory, autoimmune, brain health, hormonal health. So I sort of was always oriented that way. And then I got my board certification as soon as I was able to.
Got it. Yeah. So we hear these terms of you are what you eat. Some of the things you're talking about. And I've always, when I started learning about these concepts, feels like decades ago. I started. I like the concept, and so it stuck with me. And I share with a lot of my patients when I talk about the nutritional side. Is you are not what you eat. You are what you absorb. And we started talking a little bit about that before we got on here. And so again, things like leaky gut is how do you, let's talk about that. Let's focus on leaky gut. What do you think about that diagnosis, that term, and how it even gets diagnosed in modern medicine or ignored in modern medicine? And then where, again, we can get a better understanding of that if you're a patient dealing with some digestive issues.
Right. There are specific tests for intestinal permeability. I don't tend to run them. I tend to figure out if somebody's having a lot of reactions to foods and they're inflamed all over and they're having symptoms, and they most likely have leaky gut. Leaky gut happens when there is inflammation in the gut, either from maybe rooted from an infection or just, stress, and the tight junctions between the cells that hold the cells together in the gut become weak. And then macromolecules of food can, leach out, or like little trace elements, and then the body starts having an immune reaction to
when we say the gut. Just to be clear, are we talking about small intestine, large intestine, the actual stomach? Where are we talking?
To bum.
Okay, got it. And then when we're saying it leaks out, it's getting into around the visceral organs. It's getting towards. It's touching the outside
into the bloodstream. It's getting into the and then the body has an immune reaction to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes it's good to get granular with some of these things, in that I think people talk about this. We talk, again, that term inflammation gets talked about all the time. Detoxification gets talked about all the time. I think that a lot of folks, they're like, oh, if I drink these green juices or this, $300 set that I got at whatever Whole Foods or through some multi-level marketing scheme, that and folks should be wary of those multi-level marketing schemes. There's some good stuff in there, but at the same time, I think it's
someone's just trying to make money.
Yeah.
Seriously. So.
Yes. So bottom line is, I guess it's good to know, again, where again, when does someone come to see you? Is it when they've been struggling and they've gone through traditional, we call it traditional allopathic medicine? They've seen their general practitioner. They might have even seen a specialist, an endocrinologist for hormones, a gastroenterologist maybe. And a lot of it is, again, what, we say the healthcare system, right? The majority, the mainstream, whatever we want to call it, is all about symptom control. And so if you're coming in with irritable bowel syndrome and you're having not great poops, what are we going to give you? A little pill so you have better poops? And they might even have some education around nutrition. But bottom line is that a lot of times it seems like these things do not work. And so that's when folks are coming to see a naturopath?
Well, they're coming. I'm actually a naturopathic gastroenterologist. That's my kind of official title. I get the very complex cases now at this stage of my career. I've been in practice for over 35 years now. Sounds crazy, but and so I get the complex cases. I actually get people who've had treatment failure for SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, IBS, IBD, from traditional medicine, Western medicine, and from other functional doctors. From other, colleagues of mine refer people to me. So I sometimes get really complicated cases. So that's how they find me. And other people just, have heard of me, or they're having trouble and they want to see somebody who really focuses on this and isn't like a general functional medicine person. So that's when they come to me. And sometimes they've done all the treatments, they've done all the antimicrobials, they've done all the antibiotics, they've done all the drugs that you can name off. They've tried all the diets.
I guess the question is, with your experience with that, how, and I have the same thing as a physical therapist and someone who also does fitness work. I always say, like, if I had gotten you 5 years ago, I think we'd be in a much better situation. That doesn't mean our situation now is hopeless, but we got a longer road and a harder road, the more damage that's been accumulated. So it sounds like these folks are accumulating damage, trying, again, the conventional medicine approach, if you will. So yeah, how do you try to get those folks a little earlier? I think
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great if I could get them earlier and it's a simple situation. But as it is, yeah, I think we could save a lot of grief and trouble if they did come earlier. But as it is, people find me when they find me.
Well, and within the functional medicine space that we're
Mhm.
talking about testing and things like that, is it useful for someone who's got some kind of symptoms to spend, let's say, $2,000 on a bunch of tests just to get a better understanding of the symptoms that they might have developed or starting to develop, or working with, and I've heard much more expensive testing with initial consultations with functional medicine. Let's do like $5,000 of testing to really get to the bottom of this thing, to get to
Yeah.
the root cause. And again, I love the concept, and I think it's a great concept. But I that's where I want to get down to the granular, and the question becomes,
Sure.
are there tests that, again, I'm a 40, I think 41, I'm turning 42 this year. I'm a 41-year-old, relatively healthy human. Are there tests that you think I should be doing to look at, do I have, what is the, how much inflammation do I have going on in my gut? Stool tests, pee tests, all that, Dutch tests. There's all these different tests that we hear about, that we see, that can give us a lot of information. But again, how much should I be spending to be proactive in some of these things? Should I just be doing basic lab work, again, vitamin D testing, these kind of things? So yeah, I'll throw it back to you
Sure.
I'm going to be selfish and ask, what can I do as a healthy person to
As a healthy person?
Yeah.
I would say,
quotation.
To your point before, the truth is that a lot of functional medicine docs really mark up their tests.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think I ever have anybody spending $2,000, $5,000 on testing alone. So I tend to not take a markup on my testing, which business-wise maybe isn't smart, but I really want to get the data so that I can do a good job with the patient. So that, that's a business question. And some people, have no compunction of marking their tests up 100%, and going down a big rabbit hole of tests. Now, specifically to you as a 41-year-old male, what kind of tests can you do? I really target the tests towards what is going on. Everybody's got something going on. So in my situation, it's a lot of gut stuff. So I might, if they, I'd have them send me the tests they've already done, if, through a gastro. So I would have those just for reference. And then I typically like to, just as a basic thing, for my population, run a SIBO breath test and a comprehensive stool test. And I tend to use GIFX from Genova because I like that one better than some of the other ones out there, though there's some good ones out there. That tells me what's going on in the small intestine, large intestine, whether there's inflammation, whether they're digesting food. It gives me the whole health of the microbiome. So
do you think that's useful if I'm not necessarily having symptoms, is my question?
Not necessarily. Probably, basic blood work. I would maybe expand, depending on your family history, I would maybe expand on, the cardiac lipid stuff.
My father died of a heart attack at 41 from, so any of that, I know I am at risk, but if there was other factors as we get into it, but
so probably for you, like an EBT, the calcium score might be good to get a baseline at age 40. And because calcification is really what drives plaque development. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. LPA, APOE, your APOE genetic markers might be useful. And then lipids, of course.
So you do find when you say lipids, we're talking about HDL, LDL. You do find that to be useful, or
somewhat?
There's a lot
somewhat. Mainly probably for someone in your situation with a family history, I would probably really focus in on that calcium score to start.
And I'll share that. So no, you didn't mention ApoB. That's the big one that Dr. Peter Attia is all the rage.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
I think he argues that's like if you did nothing else, just do the ApoB. I ended up actually through my traditional cardiologist and GP doing a CT angiogram, looking for plaque. How do you feel about that as a test?
That's fine. All the imaging is good. It's not gonna steer you in the wrong direction. What I really dislike is when someone has a cholesterol and elevated LDL, and they're like, maybe their cholesterol total is like 230, and they which to me is not terrible, and then they immediately get shoveled to statins. That just rankles me.
It was mentioned, statins were mentioned to me, and I kind of said, I'm going to hold off and see. And, I live a pretty clean lifestyle. My HDL, I don't think is ever going to go up, I think, due to genetics. I haven't done the genetic testing. Is that's something the genetic markers can tell me, though? I think, again, I could predict that based on my father's, history, as well as the only thing I know. And again, I eat a pretty clean diet. I can probably clean it up a little bit, but the other thing I know to increase HDL is the good cholesterol for anyone listening is high intensity exercise, which I literally competed in CrossFit and ran a CrossFit gym. I was doing high intensity exercise for almost a decade, and I still do some version of that. And so it didn't seem to improve my HDL. Basically, I think I'm stuck.
You got to also watch the inflammation if you're doing really super intense exercise, because it's the guys who drop dead on the running trail in Boulder who actually can have normal cholesterol, but they're running, long, high miles, and they're not giving themselves recovery. So they get inflamed, and that's going to drive plaque formation. Yeah. So inflammation again, inflammation.
So to inflammation, what markers, and are those markers, if I do a test right now, if I'm saying we finish this, I go to the lab and get my inflammatory markers done, is that just a snapshot of today, or is that good? Like an A1C for blood glucose is looking at the past 3 months or 6 months, depending on, I guess, the lab. But or is it, do you we're using those inflammatory markers when we talk about them? C-reactive protein is one of them. If you have other ones, love to hear them. But
well, the interleukins.
But are those giving you that, like, oh, I've had a stressful week? 2 nights ago, I only had 2.5 hours of sleep. I'm sure that threw off my blood work.
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, if after you run a triathlon, you probably don't want to get your inflammatory markers done. So, you want to be rested before you do that. That just seems really, really smart.
And I guess I'll take this over to maybe a wider population. I have a patient right now who's dealing with what I think is REDS. I assume you're familiar with REDS?
Not so much.
Reduced energy deficiency syndrome is for athletes, triathletes. They tend to not take in enough calories, and then they're kind of, in a lot of the endurance community, since we're talking about that, they're trying to kind of keep their weight down, but at the same time they're burning a lot of calories.
Maybe
they're under fueling, basically. Because they're like, I got to stay lean to keep my times, whatever. And these are a lot of people who are not necessarily competing for anything. But basically then what happens is very commonly stress fractures in the bone. So again, I might get them in orthopedic situations. And so bringing that all together, though, it's I think echoing or amplifying that message that I love that we got to this part of underfueling and not recovering enough. A lot of people don't realize any exercise you do, it's the recovery where you're getting the most benefit. You can do a very strong stimulus. If you're under recovered, though, you're not getting the benefits. In fact, you might be causing yourself a bigger hole down the line.
That's right. So, and you got to fuel with the fats and proteins, and you got to be absorbing the fats and proteins.
Yeah,
which
this
is
one particular. I was going to say the one particular person I have, don't know where she got it from, but 1,400 calories is what she was taking in. She had a stress fracture already, thinking she's got, because she's not moving as much, she's going to keep her calories down, I think, even more. And then she's still trying to do like an F45 class where it's not as much running because she's used to running, but the impact on that tibia where she had the stress fracture. So I was like, it took a while to get to that questioning, and because it's not necessarily a standard question, like how many calories are you taking in? Most people don't even track that. But it took a while to get there. And I was like, sounds like you're really under fueling. And I had to show her all these different pieces. I even used diagnostic ultrasound to look at the health of the bone, the inflammation of the bone, where she specifically has her pain. And, even despite having the pain being a signal to the body, and I'm not necessarily talking to you, Dr. Tara, but this is more for the general population because I know
Sure.
you know this stuff. But wanted to share that little example of where this conversation took us. So anyway, I think that fueling piece is a huge component of working with any. If you're an active human being and you want to be healthy, I think it's important to understand that the recovery piece is just as vital, if not more vital. And again, I have a toddler right now. There's a lot of mornings where I wake up and I'm like, should I work out at 6 a.m. or should I sleep in for the extra half hour? And I choose that sleep, maybe 4 out of 5 times at this
Absolutely.
point. Not just because I'm a lazy person, but I'm like, I'm justifying the fact that, and I use a Whoop tracker. I'd love to hear what you think about those from an overall health perspective. But yeah, I think that it's an important, again, message to keep amplifying. What do you think of these trackers?
They look fun. I haven't used them.
Okay.
But,
Good enough.
they look fun. The people also use the Oura ring. So I'd say whatever works for you.
Yeah, I'll just
if
I'll
you
just
really,
share.
some people really like to kind of geek out on the numbers and things. I'm like, I love it. But
Well, yeah, that's where I think it's useful. Again, if we do certain testing, and it's saying, hey, you're highly inflamed. I'm going to look at my recovery score. I happen to be at 88% today. This is my home screen of my Whoop. So 88% recovery. I got 85% of my sleep. That's my strain over here. Yeah, I did have that red a few days ago. So you can look at these trends. You can put a little journal. You can say, did I have gluten today? Did I have dairy today? And then it'll keep kind of doing really basic correlations for you and say, hey, we noticed that anytime you have an alcoholic drink after 9 p.m., which I log, you can log, you are 10% less recovered. And you can start seeing these trends and then start changing actual behavior based on that.
I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome for people to do that.
Yeah. Again, you start to go on a botanical or a certain medication as well. You could start seeing, like in the last week, I've been noticing, again, my recovery, my sleep is deeper. Again, I think there's questions of, is it 100% accurate? Is it going to be as good as laboratory testing? I'm a big fan of the Whoop more than the Oura, particularly because I listened to their CEO, their founder, Will Ahmed, who's a Harvard graduate and all that good stuff. And they are very on top of and really, I think, try their best to get as high as lab quality as possible. They actually recently had this one does the new model. This is medical grade, and they do an ECG that you can just run, as well as blood pressure insights, they call them. And the FDA actually just kind of like got into a little battle with them, saying we don't want you calling this medical grade and a whole thing there. So that's an interesting thing too. But I want to switch over to a couple two other topics that I really want to hear your perspective on as a digestion specialist. One is electrolytes, very big, especially here in Colorado. We're in thinner air. Anytime I have somebody visiting, so do you have any particular thoughts on electrolytes, the balance between magnesium, potassium, sodium?
I'd like to see people on some sort of trace minerals on the regular. I feel like a lot of people, especially if they've had chronic stress in their life, whether from over exercising or just life stress, they could drink a gallon of water, and they're just going to like pee it out, and they're not going to absorb. And they're, in my population, I get a lot of constipated people. So, because the water, either like, well, I drink, so much, and it's like, well, you're not absorbing, and maybe because you've had stress, your aldosterone levels are low, and so your electrolytes are imbalanced. So,
and I actually tell folks the more water they're bringing into their body, the more that's a carrier to push further sodium out of your body. And so if you're out of balance with sodium, and I used to work at the New York City Marathon finish line as a volunteer, and we'd be catching people around, especially around the 4-hour mark. I think those were just lesser athletes or whatever, which is it's not a bad thing if you run a 4-hour marathon, folks. That's a pretty good accomplishment. But those are the folks who are much more amateur and were not taking their sodium and electrolytes as seriously. And I'd see them and I'd be catching them. We'd have to put these folks on IVs, and I literally would just keep a pocket full of little restaurant salt tablets from like a diner, and I would just throw them down their throat, and they're like, I can see color again. But they would be like, I stopped at every water station, and I'm like, yeah, and you can see it on their shirt. You see the little like the white, of the sodium coming out of their body. Real quick shout out to one of my sponsors here, drinkelement.com/fitcare.
Yeah.
So if you've tried Element, Rob Wolf was a biochemist by training. So he actually came up with this formulation. He was working with a lot of these high level athletes that were eating grilled chicken breasts and sweet potatoes and super clean and broccoli. And it was great. And they were healthy, but then they were actually crashing their hormonal profile, their aldosterone, all that good stuff, because they were not taking in enough sodium. And there was this whole sodium is bad for you. But if you're very athletic and you're sweating a lot. I actually did the Boulder Half Ironman last year, and I took in an element packet every hour. So I took at least eight packets of that, because it took me a little over 7 hours to finish. I did not train very much. That's another story. But bottom line is, so if you guys want to go check out drinkelement.com/fitcare, love that. The other question I have for you, would love to hear, because I think it's in the zeitgeist, is I'm actually drinking some right now. If that tells you how I like it, is the kombucha. So this is an iced tea lemonade, Brew Doctor. What do we think of fermented foods and how that impacts gut health?
If somebody does not have SIBO, it could be fine. But there's a lot of people in my population that if they drink kombucha, it's going to flare their symptoms. So fermented foods.
Can you go into why that is? Because I think that'll give us a better sense of.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you have an overgrowth of bacteria, for instance, in the small intestine, or fungal species in the small intestine, you start getting symptoms. They start producing gas like methane, hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen, when they feed on fermentable carbohydrates. So, and that can be something like an apple. But you get something that's already fermented, and that's just going to really kick that reaction. And so when it produces extra, gases from fermentation, hydrogen sulfide, methane, they're going to, some people get bloated, some people get more IBS symptoms. So, and that can be from an overgrowth of fungus or bacteria. And it often, lives in the small or large intestine. So I'm not saying don't do it. Man, after my husband and I hike and take our electrolytes, we love coming. I don't have SIBO. I'm pretty good. We come down from 12,000 feet or wherever we've been playing, and we stop at this little store and we get our kombucha. It's a ritual. We share a kombucha on the way home. So I'm fine with that, but
not for everyone.
Not for everyone, especially the population that sort of makes its way to me.
Yeah. One other question I want to dive into here, and
Sure.
I sent you the episode. Dr. Alexis Sams, one of my classmates from physical therapy school, she's shifted over to this nutritional piece, food allergy stuff, and we talked about food allergy a little bit, and so you mentioned, and she said the same thing. I think where you guys stand is food allergy testing for the consumer out there. Something that is not well researched. I think there's not a great lab that anyone really should trust, and correct me if I'm wrong, that at this point, if someone tells you, hey, you're allergic to egg whites and avocado and coconut, because it seems like that comes up positive for almost every human being I've ever heard get tested.
It can be foods that you're eating a lot of.
Yeah.
And then your body starts developing antibodies. It can be from, the leaky gut, but often I just find that what happens if people take those tests as verbatim, they end up restricting their diet to like 5 foods, which is never good for the microbiome, and you end up sicker in the long run, which is why I'm not really doing food allergy tests anymore unless someone really insists on it. I feel like there's other ways to manipulate the food plan.
What do you think of sorry to cut you off, but you mentioned a popular concept here is this food elimination concept, where people cut it way down and then start to introduce new foods and just look at symptoms. What do you think of that? Just kind of, DIY, if you will.
There's ways to do it that are a little more nuanced. Like I really like, for my population, I really like the biphasic food plan, which is from a naturopathic doctor she's out of Australia, Dr. Nirla Jacobi. And I think Heidi Turner, she worked with her, she's a nutritionist, to put together this plan. And it's sort of a version of low FODMAPs, but low FODMAPs can restrict you down to 5 foods. Could be really unsustainable. Can you just tell folks real quick what, that term is, FODMAPs? You might see it, you might read it. It's out there. It's basically fermentable carbohydrates. There's like the fructols and the oligosaccharides and the polyols, and it's an acronym for a bunch of the sugars that are in foods the carbs that are in foods that can feed certain species of bacteria and fungi. So there is the FODMAPs diet, low FODMAPs diet, but it's very hard for people to sustain. So I tend to do the biphasic, which is a little more reasonable, sustainable version of it. So that's
what do you think of the 30-day kind of reset of eliminating the paleo diet? Is the way I kind of describe that. Seems to have lost a lot of its.
Paleo is nice, but if someone's eating a lot of sweet potatoes, it could still, in their SIBO, it could still really flare their gut. So
well, again, Rob Wolf, who's the founder of the Drink Element, he was one of the most popular paleo guys. I want to say around or 2010s. And so his whole thing was 30 days, eliminate gluten, dairy, and it was grains, gluten, dairy, and legumes as the 3 biggest inflammatory markers. And if you're still having issues there, then he has an autoimmune protocol,
AIP. That is really hard for people to do. And I found a lot of my people, I'm familiar. A lot of people got sicker doing AIP because it's so restrictive. So I don't really push that.
And for anyone, I mean, that there's like, it cuts out like nightshades. So we're talking about no eggplant, no tomato, things like that, seeds,
eggs. It's difficult. It's not really sustainable for most people, though people can get temporary relief. I feel like let's get to the root cause. What's causing you to be so sensitive that you're getting so inflamed? What's going on in your gut? So that's kind of where I land with all this.
Gotcha. I'll ask one more big kind of trending thing that I think a lot of people are keeping an eye on is the conversation around alcohol. And Andrew Huberman, again, Peter Attia, some of the top health podcasters in the space seem to be pushing that the basic concept, I'm oversimplifying it, is that no alcohol is good. You might be able to, I think the last one I heard was maybe having 1 to 2 drinks a week, alcoholic drinks, whatever we call that, is okay. But anything more than that might be negatively impacting your health, your recovery, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So
exactly. It's a toxin. But I also have people who are, working with their SIBO. So they're not, and they're going to a wedding and they want to have a drink. So ironically, what I say to them is like, well, you're going to do better with clear spirits, like 1 ounce of a clear spirit in a drink twice a week. So I'm talking vodka, gin, and clear tequila. So I always joke like, don't drink the organic wine or the beer, because that's going to flare you like crazy. But you can have like a vodka and soda. And so I say like, I'm recommending you do a shot of tequila instead of a glass of wine, which is, people always laugh, but no alcohol is best. But if they're going to do for my population who's fermenting like crazy, they're going to do better with they're going to tolerate a clear spirit. And I'm talking like 1 drink. I'm not talking like a night of drinking vodka. So, but definitely I'm a no alcohol person and push that as much as I can.
Yeah, along those lines, there's been a big push to the NA community, or do you think there's benefit to having the NA beer with no alcohol? Do you think that, just whatever it is, fermenting the alcohol out is good enough for the gut, for health, or is there still a limitation there?
There's gluten in there. So, so
fair enough.
Because there's gluten, and because we're in North America where the agricultural practices maybe aren't as clean as other parts of the world, gluten's always going to be a problem. So there's that. And then there's the fermentation of the hops and stuff that might trigger something, even if it doesn't have alcohol. But my main thing is gluten, gluten in it.
So you think generally every human should be, especially Americans, should be off as much gluten as possible, or 100% gluten-free, or?
In general, yes. I actually have a colleague right now who's traveling Europe, and she's posting, she actually only eats ribeye steaks. And she's carnivore, full carnivore, which I don't always recommend. She's in Europe and she's eating like everything and drinking all this alcohol. And she has she's tracking her Oura ring and everything. And it's showing that she's okay. But if she does that here, she doesn't feel well. So that's anecdotal, but I've had several of my patients travel to Europe and they can eat gluten, eat dairy, no problem. They come back here, they bloat up and look like they're 6 months pregnant.
Yeah.
When they're not. So I'm not a big fan of gluten here.
Yeah. And I mean, the way I talk about it, tell me if you agree with this, is I still think everyone's kind of on a spectrum of that.
Yes.
We're probably seeing it shift, but I call it like a triangle, pyramid, whatever you want to call it. At the very top, there's 5% of people maybe, and I'd be curious what you think of the percentages. I'm just kind of pulling it out of basic conversations, and I think the reasons are going to be a little difficult, but 5% of people who can completely tolerate gluten, 5% of the bottom who are like extremely, and maybe that's getting up to 10% at the bottom of that pyramid, where 10% of people just can't tolerate it at all. If they smell gluten, they have to run to the bathroom or bloat up. But there's that spectrum in the middle where, again, like if I go to New York City, I'm going to have some bagels, I'm going to have some pizza. Again, might not be the healthiest thing, but I tend to feel it after a few days in my joints. It could be a combination of many factors, but generally I definitely feel if I have too much gluten, I start to feel it. But I also don't. I generally try to be gluten free. My wife is gluten free. But yeah, I think it's useful to have that perspective of, because some people just say like, I eat gluten, I'm fine. And again, a lot of times it's people don't know what they don't know. And is it, again, this slowly sinking ship.
Exactly.
Like, you can ignore that, the water filling
down
up
here, and they don't know what it feels like to live up here.
Right.
Like they're just, but
they're surviving, but they're not thriving.
Right. And they're just like, isn't this, I'm 40 and I'm fatigued and my joints hurt, and
that's normal. It's normal. All my other 40-year-olds are doing the same thing.
Right.
Everyone complains about their knees and their backs.
Right. Whereas like 60s.
So that's normal.
Yeah.
That's normal.
So
yeah, and again, we'll kind of close off on that message. I think that we're trying to get people to be better. And so again, guys, if you're you want to get on top of your health, my big thing is I'm trying to get people to look at their movements. And again, especially the more active you are, the more you should be checking your movements and make sure there's no lingering things that might permeate down the line where you might feel okay going for a 10-mile jog. But it's there might be things that you're ignoring, you're hiding. And the same thing for nutrition here that I think Dr. Tara, Skye Goldin, I'm gonna clarify that. So yeah, tell folks if you have a closing thought and where they can find you.
Closing thought. I think we covered a lot today. But if you've been working and not getting progress with your digestive issues or general health, you can reach me at skyegoldin.com. I also have an Instagram at Dr. Tara Skye Goldin, same on TikTok. You can see some of my little video clips. But I
think we have all this in the show notes wherever you guys are listening or watching.
All right. But that's where they can find me.
Cool.
So they can book a discovery call and we could see how we can work.
Question I got to throw at you in that context is how does it work across state lines? Are you able to see somebody from another state, since we got a nice wide audience here?
Sure. I do wellness educational consults across state lines.
Okay. And same thing internationally, I assume.
Yes.
Gotcha. So not establishing a medical provider relationship.
I won't be their doctor, but I'll be their guide of sorts.
Great. Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you again. And we'll hope you got 1% better with this conversation. I know I